Woodruff and what happened to Bob. Can you describe sort of what that scene was like and how you got the news? It was sort of because I remember very well, at NBC when David Bloom died.
Of course.
And it was so horrible that this had happened to David. And it was not that long after, right?
No, and they were very close friends, as you know. They were both embedded, and their families were close. And in fact, Bob Wodruff was with the Marines sort of to the north. And he called back and said, I want to come out because of David Bloom, because I want to be there for his family. And we pulled him out as fast as we could to come back to be with David's family, which is a terrible tragedy. And Bob and Lee had become friends at that point. We'd had their family to our house. We'd been together and knew each other pretty well. And to think back, I had announced Bob Wodruff as the co-anchor of World News just 30 days before.
Right.
He'd just been in the job 30 days. And he was over there because it was the State of the Union address, and that was going to be the big topic, the Iraq War, at that point, which was not going particularly well. And I got a call about 5 in the morning on a Sunday morning from the desk, waking me from a sound sleep, saying, there's been an incident, there's been some sort of IED, they identified as IED right away, in a town north of Baghdad, and Bob and his cameraman, Doug Vogt, had been injured. Doug may be badly injured. Bob, it's an injury to his arm. And Bob has asked that you not call Lee, his wife, because he wants to. So I thought, this is bad, but okay, Bob is saying it's good enough so that he wants to call her. And then, as these stories do, it started to unravel, and I got more calls, and it was worse and worse and worse. And Bob was injured in the brain, and he was flown down to Baghdad, and he was flown up to Balad, which is the big military hospital, and he was in surgery. And I got into the newsroom as fast as I could after calling Lee, tracking down poor Lee with her kids, who was down at Disney World because Bob was away.
So did you talk to Lee before anyone else had?
Yeah. So I woke Lee up with a sound sleep. By this point, it was probably 7 o'clock or so. It had been a couple of hours. That I'd held off in part because I was told that Bob didn't want me to call her. But then it became clear he was not going to be in a position to call her anytime soon. So I said, I'm just going ahead and calling her. And so I woke her with sound sleep. And we had training. We brought in a grief counselor before the Iraq War to give us training in case somebody was injured, to talk to the family. So I was trying to remember what this person had told us what to do. So I sort of thought through, I'm going to tell her this first. So I get her on the phone and I say, well, Lee, it's David Westin, and there's been an incident with Bob. And sorry, I get emotional with this. Before I could say anything more, she said, is my husband dead? I said, no, I'm sorry, Lee, he's not dead, but we don't know his condition. And he's being treated as well as possible, and I'll let you know as soon as we know anything. And then she had to wake her kids up and tell her kids and call his parents and things. And then we had surgery.
Their kids were little at the time, right?
Yeah, well, the twins, the girls were, oh gosh, this was 2006. So the twins must not have been more than 5 or 6 years old. So they were very young. So I went in the newsroom, and then we spent hours with them in surgery. And Doug came out of surgery reasonably quickly after an hour or so. But Bob remained in surgery for hours. At one point, they called us from the hospital because we had a phone line into the hospital. And they said they want to know who to notify next of kin. So we thought he might well die. And then he came out of surgery, of course, and then they transported him to Launchstool. We flew Lee back up. We flew Lee and the family over to Launchstool to meet with Bob to see him. But then I flew down to Bethesda on the Tuesday, the day of the State of the Union, ironically. I flew down to Launchstool, down to Bethesda to go with Lee for the briefing with the doctors. And you can't believe how horrific the injuries were. I mean, they had a X-ray of his head, and it was like ridiculous. So we didn't know if he would live at that point, even 3 days into it. If he lived, we had no idea whether he'd ever wake up again. If he woke up, what shape he'd be in. So that big, draining emotional story ends with triumph.
I know, he's a miracle, really.
He's a miracle. It could never have happened. He surpassed anyone's expectation. of what was possible. I mean, he's now on the air reporting. He's right now down covering the Edwards trial. And he's a remarkable human being, and it's a huge triumph of spirit and resilience and everything else. So it ends up a triumph. But, you know, at the time, I really thought, what have I done to this man and his family? I mean, Bob wanted to do it, don't misunderstand me. It was voluntary. He was eager to do it. He'd been to Iraq several times. It was a passion of his. So he was eager to do it, but I still authorized it. I said he could do it. And I felt enormous responsibility for it.